Hello and good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Sorcero webinar. This time we're going to talk about if AI is the missing ingredient in omnichannel success for medical affairs. I'm super excited to be joined today by experts and industry leaders in this space, John Wahba and Toby O'Brien. Maybe we'll do a very quick round of intros before diving in. I'll start. I'm Zeinab Sulaiman. I lead the Medical Affairs Center of Excellence here at Sorcero. I'm very excited to be joined here by Toby and John today. Toby, maybe a quick intro from your side.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning. It's very nice to be here. I am a digital and omnichannel consultant. I've been working in digital and omnichannel for about 15, 16 years, all in the healthcare, life sciences, biotech kind of space.
Thank you, Toby. John?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is John, and I lead global medical education and medical digital comms here at Gilead and Kites, focusing on cell therapy. Previously worked on digital transformation in previous roles, and I'm a physician by background.
Thank you, John. And thank you both so much for, again, for agreeing to be part of this webinar. Really excited to have you here. Maybe a very quick disclaimer before we start. As I mentioned, the objective of this webinar is to share best practices and hear from our thought leaders across the industry on a topical challenge that we know most pharmaceutical industries are currently facing. And while this is a non-promotional webinar, there may be references to specific products or features as part of discussions and best practice sharing discussions that we will have today. Before we start the discussion and before I kind of jump in and get us started, I want to run a quick poll. Just to get a better understanding of where different companies and different folks are along their omnichannel journey. So, quick question, does your medical affairs team currently have an active omnichannel strategy? And the options are, we're developing a strategy, we have a strategy or implementing it, we have a strategy but it's not implemented, we have some digital tactics but not really a strategy, and no strategy or tactics. So please feel free to select one of these options that's most relevant to your situation. We'll give it a few more seconds. Okay. So that's great. So about 40% of the audience are currently developing a strategy. So it's very timely and it's a good discussion to have with those guys. About 23% have a strategy and are currently implementing it, and 18% have no strategy or tactics. This is really helpful just for us to understand across the industry where we are. And I guess I'm not particularly surprised to see that, given our understanding of where we are and medical affairs challenges and difficulties that we face in this space. And we're going to talk about some of those challenges today. And I would love to hear your thoughts after this webinar about whether these challenges are resonating with you and maybe are the reason why you don't have a strategy or the strategy is not being as easily implemented. So, John, firstly, we'll come to you. Given that medical affairs, you know, the importance of omnichannel strategy for medical affairs and the fact that we're always talking about it, how important would you say it is for medical affairs to actually have an omnichannel strategy and implement it? Do we really need it? Can't we just stick to the traditional face-to-face engagement that we've always done?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because for me, face-to-face is part of omnichannel, and it's important to start communicating with clinicians, with your stakeholders in the way that they would like to be communicated to, and for them to get access to that information as soon as they would like to have it, and ensure it's personalized. I guess it's important to define what omnichannel is, because I think that means different things to different people. But actually, for me, it's not so much about an omnichannel strategy. It's omnichannel for me as an enabler for something much bigger, which is good customer experience. And I think medical is starting to understand the importance of omnichannel as an enabler to get that great customer experience. And for me, it's not about medical omnichannel or commercial omnichannel, it's customer experience, where medical is a key partner or player or driver or of some aspects of that experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I completely agree. I think customer engagement is really what everyone should be focused on, because omnichannel seems to be a buzzword that gets thrown around. So Toby, given that the focus should be customer engagement as opposed to just omnichannel for the sake of omnichannel, do you think it makes more sense for it to be a medically driven initiative or a commercially driven one or a jointly cross-functionally driven? And what do we actually see in practice?
So that's also a very good question. So I think there's a couple of different schools of thought, and often the experience of where it happens seems to depend on how an organization is structured and how they kind of go about their kind of comms. But John kind of hit the nail on the head with saying, like, face-to-face is a part of omnichannel. It's called omnichannel because it covers everything. It's about experiences and shouldn't necessarily differentiate your experience based on which part of a company you're engaging with. Your experience should be a great one, whether you're engaging with commercial, whether you're engaging with medical affairs, corporate comms, HR, kind of whatever. And to that end, I from my experience, the most kind of successful stuff is where it's being done almost like above department. So it's a centralized approach, because then you can share tools, you can share learning, software, resources, lots of different things can be kind of cross-pollinated, with all the right firewalls and frameworks in place to ensure like good compliance and all that kind of stuff. But when it's sat at almost like an above company level or a centralized position, you've got a much greater chance of success rather than it just being done for medical affairs or just being done for commercial.
And I think in theory, we can all agree with that, right? That makes perfect sense that it should be customer centric and therefore omnichannel. But in practice, at least from my experience, I've seen that our commercial folks often get frustrated with medical affairs slowness in embracing omnichannel or the lack of willingness perhaps to implement omnichannel tactics because they perceive it to be very proactive, and therefore they decide they're going to do it without medical affairs. They're going to just take a very commercial omnichannel approach where it comes to customer engagement, and medical affairs is left carrying on doing things in a very traditional way, which is mostly face-to-face. What's your experience around this, John? Have you seen the truly cross-functional approach be done well? What lessons can we take from it?
Yeah, I have, and I think it always starts with medical being at the table right from the beginning. I think when it comes to omnichannel, even though I don't like using that word, it is something that a lot of people see as a commercial thing or a commercial tactic. And I think that's also part of the problem where you don't maybe get medical buy-in as quickly as you want to. But actually having medical as part of around the table right at the beginning, sharing their insights about the customers, about what customers need, how they want to be communicated to or with, is key to start setting up what the user journey could potentially look like, where medical can input, where commercial can input, what those segmentation or personas sort of look like. Having medical right at the beginning inputting will make it easier to adopt from a medical perspective, rather than coming later and saying, actually, none of these personas or none of these segments work or make sense. Having them right at the beginning, forming this with the team is important.
No, absolutely. I think medical having a seat at the table and also having the readiness and the willingness to take part is really important. And it's great that you have experienced a positive situation where medical and commercial were able to partner and do this well. And I would love to kind of get more of your thoughts around that as we progress and with some of the follow-up questions that will come. Toby, can we talk a little bit about some of the best practice, so-called best practice examples that we often get asked to talk about or we hear about when we talk about omnichannel from across industries? So for example, whenever there's talk of omnichannel, we always hear about, other industries are doing it really well. Netflix disrupted the entertainment industry completely with what they did, or Airbnb changed the rental market. They did it for omnichannel, so pharma should be able to do it too. Are these cross-industry examples actually relevant, or do we need to think about completely differentiating omnichannel customer engagement for pharma specifically? What are your thoughts around that?
Yes, that's a question that gets cropped up a lot, and I get asked that question all the time. I have a set of slides that with a lot of that information in, because people want context, right? They want to understand how it's been done in other places. It has its challenges kind of comparing. So I think we can take elements from what other businesses have done. So the ones that get mentioned a lot are Netflix, Airbnb, like Amazon is like the royalty of omnichannel, because that's completely customer centric. And that there are elements that you can take from it, but we can't compare apples to apples, given the nature of pharma. It obviously also has its large corporation, large enterprise level challenges that other businesses have, with all the regulatory elements on it and the firewalls between commercial and medical. So whilst we can use some of that stuff and it is kind of relevant for kind of some inspiration, I think the great stuff within looking at those examples is looking at the more specific elements of kind of like how individual parts of them work. So if you think about personalization, that's something that's done outside of pharma incredibly well. And a very simplistic example of personalization is grocery shopping. Of any grocery company that you shop with digitally, either on an app or online. If you're in the UK, you might shop at places like Tesco or Waitrose. But what these things do really well is they know what you've purchased. They suggest alternative purchases. They suggest things that you might like because you purchased this at this time last year. And it's hugely personalized, and it's completely tailored around you, the individual. And that is all driven by data. And that is something that I think we can take as an example of great personalization of content delivered really simply, but through the use of data. And we can use that example in healthcare to look at how we deliver our interventions, be them digitally, be them face-to-face, in medical, in commercial, in anything. And we can kind of pull those examples across. So it has somewhat relevance, but I think we have to look at the specifics rather than the overall kind of best practice examples.
That's really great. And I completely agree. I actually completely rely on Waitrose remembering what I ordered last time to do my next set of shops. I don't have a shopping list anymore. I completely rely on the AI to remember what I need for my weekly shop. John, anything to add to that?
Obviously, other supermarkets available, right? I think I completely agree with what Toby is saying. And, for me, it's about the understanding the principles and bringing them in. And to bring this back to sort of medical affairs, because that's what I know about. It's, that concept of not just personalizing the content, but personalizing the experience with the clinicians that we're talking with, or the stakeholders that we are speaking with. So if they've already been in contact about a specific question, having that, and Toby mentioned, the importance of data, having some, that memory, and then serving them the right content, or tailoring the experience based on how we've already engaged with them before, or the topics that they're interested in. That is, for me, great customer experience, which we can learn from other industries, but then adapt to how we can do it compliantly and within our regulations in pharma. And for me, really, innovation is, how do you take an idea and then work with your regulations and within your guardrails to actually make it work? And how can we actually think outside the box to make something of value to our customers?
You guys definitely alluded to some of the components of my next question, but in summary, there are specific components that we can take and we can learn from these other industries that can really help shape how we do customer engagement in pharma, specifically for medical affairs, where, exactly to your point, John, the clinicians kind of almost expect us to be able to use the insights that we've collected from our engagements with them to know what kind of content they want, when, what channel. So thinking about those specific ingredients and the lessons that we've learned from successful implementation of customer engagement in other industries. Let's look at those kind of very specific components. What are some of those very key operational components for good customer engagement that we can bring in? So, John, you mentioned personalization, using customer insights to drive those drive those kind of omnichannel engagements. The example that I always talk about is Amazon, right? Like Toby was saying at the beginning. When you talk about automated email campaigns, I always think about if Amazon didn't very specifically send me email recommendations with that has products that I know I'm interested in, or I've purchased before, or it's in my shopping list, I would immediately unsubscribe. I wouldn't be interested. So just the thought of Amazon sending out mass emails with generic products that they send to everyone, it's just something I can't, it's unheard of. I can't even imagine it. With that in mind, what can we learn from these? What are those kind of key components of success that we can bring in from these other industries?
So I'll mention a sort of a phrase that I learned to use more and more in in previous roles, which is being brilliant at the basics. And there are certain things, again, back to medical affairs, that we want to make sure that we have and learnings from these industries. Have we got good insights about our healthcare professionals? Do we know what they want? Do we know what channels they like to be communicated with, or what topics they're interested in? Where is our content at the moment? What state is our content in? Is it in a state that can be used across different channels? Is it bite-sized enough? Because again, medical traditionally, we put loads of content out there, loads of really long slide decks, big documents. Is our house in order when it comes to that content to be able to share it in the right way across different channels? What channels have we already got? But really the most important thing is the people piece, the buy-in from our medical teams. Do they understand what it is that we are asking them to do? And personalization, it shouldn't be anything new to medical. Medical is our masters of personalization, because by the nature of the role, they serve the content based on the question that they're getting from their clinician. So the concept isn't new. I think it's just when we put the sort of omni-channel name on it, people freak out a little bit. But actually, this is not new. This is what they've been doing, but we're trying to optimize this in a better way. So I think for me, it's ensuring you've got the right mindset and buy-in from the organization. People are trained and understand what they need to do. But this is part of what they've already been doing. It's just enhancing it. And then looking at the tools that you've already got, your channels, your insights, and your content. Is it in the right way to then be communicated to that healthcare professional?
Thank you. That's really helpful and very comprehensive. Anything to add to that, Toby, in terms of any other components that you would recommend we bring in from other industries?
No, I think is the short answer. I think the idea of an extremely robust understanding of how your interventions, assets, whatever you want to call them, are being used by your customers, which most businesses that I've worked with have that data. It's not quite connected always to the implementation end of things, but it exists. So that real robust understanding, coupled with that inquisitive culture of a business to say, we must understand our customers better, and we really want to interrogate how we go about doing this. As John said, in medical, you're responding to specific queries, and you're providing personalized answers all the time. So it's looking at how you can kind of scale that up a little bit in terms of how people communicate, which is exactly what companies like Amazon, for example, it's exactly what they do. They scale that personalization up and out, so you're providing value straight from the outset. And that's where I think omnichannel, AI, data, all those brilliant things can drastically change the kind of the landscape of communications.
No, I completely agree. And I think with the kind of the availability and ease of access to AI tools, it's become even more accessible for pharma companies, especially medical affairs, to be able to really harness the value of the customer insights that they, to John's point, they very readily have to hand. Like, we have so much data and insights from our HCP interactions, from our MedInfo interactions, from the work that we do with them across advisory boards and research publications. It's just a case of being able to really centralize that and harness it to drive these personalizations. So I think medical affairs is in a really good place in terms of availability of data to be able to drive personalization, and would love to hear a bit more about that. from you guys in a few minutes. But before we get a bit deeper into that, I want to run a second poll question to get everyone's thoughts on what they think some of the key ingredients for successful customer engagement, omnichannel customer engagement is. We have the options are leadership commitment and mandate, cross-functional alignment, data analytics and customer insights, customer journey and channel optimization plan, or all of the above. A few more seconds to give everyone a chance to respond. Okay. So I specifically designed this question so that we can get all of the above as the most common answer. So I'm glad 78% of you agreed. And you know, this is everything we've just been discussing over the past few minutes, right? Like, we need every single one of these ingredients in order to be able to drive successful omnichannel customer engagement. And I think this is shared knowledge, and we all know it and we all agree with it. So despite the fact that we know what success looks like, we've seen some of the components of it in other industries, and most of us agree that we need a customer engagement omnichannel strategy. Over 50% of the people in this particular webinar said that they either don't have it or they have it, but they're not implementing it. Based on that, and despite the fact that, medical affairs have been talking about omnichannel for probably about a decade. But why is it that medical affairs is just not getting the omnichannel customer engagement done right yet? Why is it that it's not a success story? And what are some of the reasons behind this challenge, based on your experience and your understanding? Maybe we start with you first, John.
So I think probably one of the reasons is calling it omnichannel. So I think we should just stop calling it omnichannel. For me, I think it's the 4 Ps: the people, the process, the platforms, and projects. In terms of people, have you gone through that change management with your teams? Do people understand what omnichannel is and what is it that we're trying to achieve? But also, how are you linking this to your medical objectives? For me, omnichannel, again, is an enabler for good scientific engagement to increase your reach, your impact, and enable you to be good, get your story out there, your medical narrative to the right people at the right time. Have you got the right processes in place? So once you've got your content, have you got a way to get that content out immediately? Because that's one of the what the magic parts of omnichannel is, people to be able to get access to that content straight away and in bite-sized format, as I mentioned before. Have you got the right relevant platform to be able to share that content? So we mentioned face-to-face, but obviously there are also other channels that can be utilized to allow that ease of access to the HCP, a website, an email, for example. And we don't need to go crazy. What are a couple of channels that you can have in place to support this? I forgot now what the 4th P is, the project. Have you done a proof of concept with the right project to show the value of this to your medical teams to help get that buy-in? I don't think we need to prove the value of omnichannel good customer experience anymore. I think people get it, but in order to get some funding behind it, you need to say, in order for us to sort of have some successes, we've done this project, this is what happens, this is what happened, let's put some additional budget behind it. So I think a lot of organizations, a lot of teams sort of fall behind because perhaps they're not agile enough, or they try to overcomplicate things. For me, it's starting simple, making sure you've got those 4 Ps covered, and then start small and then build.
Thank you. You've also answered my second question, which was how do we go about providing solutions to these challenges? But before we move on, Toby, any other kind of reasons behind why perhaps medical affairs isn't quite as agile or as successful when it comes to implementing omnichannel strategy, beyond the fact that we're calling it omnichannel? And I agree with John. It's become such a vague phrase that we almost don't know what it means anymore, right? And because it's it's become a source of confusion. It's making it difficult for us to actually just get on with it and think about, what do our customers need? Like, how do we best engage with our key HCPs and customers that we know very well and we can engage with, but we just want to be able to give them the information that they want through the channels that they want. But for whatever reason, it's become so much more complicated and complex to actually deliver than it should be. Any other kind of commonly occurring mistakes or themes that you've experienced that seems to be adding to this particular challenge?
Well, I guess from my experience as a digital omnichannel consultant, I kind of get around a bit, and my experience is I guess a little bit different, you know. But you're completely right, is that it gets really overcomplicated, and you always see, you know, the difference between multi and omnichannel. As multi-channel is, you know, you've got the customer at the top and then all the channels underneath. Omnichannel is the big circle of things, customer bang in the middle. That's, you know, we see that slide all the time when it's being articulated, but the process of it is it's just about how you communicate, right? And it's an ongoing thing. It never changes, and it becomes really complicated and big and like massive, and you know, there's loads of buzzwords associated with it. There's tons of people getting involved in it, but realistically, it's a relatively simple concept. And from my experience, some of the reasons why it fails is everyone is jumping to the complicated right from the start, and everyone's going, okay, we need to get AI in that's going to tell everyone what this particular physician wants or needs based on all their interactions with the business, and we're going to do that. It's going to take a year to get up and running. We're going to hit the button and it will go. The reality is, it doesn't really happen, because it, you know, the project will probably fail if that happens. One of the, and to me, the reason why a lot of that fails is something that John mentioned earlier, is getting the basics right. Is the simple elements of omnichannel are like the foundation to do it properly. And when you're in the situation where there are different groups or teams, or you know, maybe there's an independent therapy area that's pushing ahead with technology, but the others aren't kind of in the same scenario, it's when you jump to that level of complexity without the simple level of understanding, the simple level of exposure to this kind of stuff, that I think it causes organizations problems, and you end up with this kind of strange race of some people are sprinting ahead, but then they get stuck because the rest of the organization is not in the same spot. And then you get others that are thinking, well, they're so far ahead now, why do we can't engage with that, we don't have the resources and time to do it. So it's I think that bringing everybody up together as a whole, the centralized functions wherever possible, to kind of make sure that it's all being leveraged for everybody, will enable that value to be demonstrated early on, so everyone can see, right, this is going to make my job easier. This is going to mean that we can have better customer experiences, and we can provide better information to people, and, you know, ultimately, you know, really increase the quality of the engagements we have with people.
That's really good insights. And as you guys were talking, I was thinking about how important each of the components of success that you're mentioning is, right? Like the buy-in, the alignment between the different teams, the infrastructure and the data, the ability to be able to personalize. There's so much that needs to be in place for omnichannel to work well. But for those 40% of our audience who don't have an omnichannel strategy, they haven't yet started even thinking about this, perhaps. If I was there, if I was one of them, and I asked you, you know, what are the first 3 things that, you know, just break it down, make it really simple for me. What are the 3 things that I need to do between now and the next 3 months in order to kickstart my omnichannel journey, my true customer engagement planning, and kind of work towards getting a bit closer to omnichannel customer engagement? What would be the top 3 things that you would do starting tomorrow? John, you go first.
I would say start by understanding what is the problem that you're trying to solve, because I think people sometimes think omnichannel is the magic bullet or the silver bullet that will solve everything. So I think look at what are your priorities, and which one of those part of your strategic priorities, your objectives, which one of those is omnichannel going to solve? I would say stakeholder buy-in is important, top down and bottom up, really, really, really key. And as part of this sort of stakeholder management and buy-in, also letting them know that this is not something that's going to happen sort of overnight or in the next 6 months. Everyone's journey is going to be different. There's so many factors that will come into play, like your degree of digital maturity, your resource, your capabilities, your understanding. All of this will come to play, and one company's experience is going to be completely different to another's, and that's okay. And also, as part of that, is that failure is okay. It's important to learn from those mistakes, and it's again part of managing those expectations that actually failure is going to be part of the process, and that's fine. And then I think the third thing is, don't try and convince everyone. Start with your early adopters, the people that are likely to work with you on this journey, and then others will follow. I think a lot of people try and convince everyone, and that's sometimes where it takes time, and you can lose a lot of time in getting things done. But you need to engage with the right people who are going to help you on this process. I think those are three. So I'll
Yes,
stop
and
there.
once you've proven the concept, I guess everyone else, you start convincing perhaps those who weren't early adopters to come along the journey with you. That's really helpful, John. Thank you. Toby, we heard from John. I just want to kind of slightly adjust the question for you, Toby, because this isn't, I completely agree with your earlier point that, we can't just jump into, oh, let's use AI to try and fix this. And let's start with AI and then everything else will follow, because that's obviously never going to be a successful route to implementing this. But given that this is a webinar about the role of AI in Omnichannel, and given that, John shared the very kind of top level first strategic steps that we need to take in order to get Omnichannel off the ground. Say when we do get to the point where we want to be able to utilize analytics, data, AI to boost our journey, which step in the process would that be? And what would be the first things that we need to do in order to start better utilizing data analytics and AI to help us with the rest of the journey? So let's say if we fast forward to the point where we're now ready to start thinking about infrastructure and data, what does that look like? And what do we need to do next?
So from that perspective, I'd probably do a couple of things. So, but simply, I wouldn't overcomplicate them at all. The first thing would be get closer to your data that you've got. So in order to do that, it's an exercise that I do with a lot of people, is you map out which sounds big, the whole customer journey, from the whole communication journey for your customers from end to end. And you pick some basic starting points you call triggers, work out what their actions are with the company, and then what data that you're gathering at each one of those points, which is nothing more than a workflow in a slide, and saying, right, we engage here, this happens, we engage here, this happens, we engage here, this happens, and this is where the data goes with it. This is what we can learn. So simple example is like, if anyone's engaging with a medical affairs hub online or any kind of medical platform online, you'll have analytics data for the website. Do you understand where people are coming from, what they're doing when they get to the site, where they're going from the site? Are they viewing videos? Are they clicking downloads? Are they moving across to somewhere else? Maybe are they submitting a medical information inquiry? All that kind of stuff. Work out what data you have and find the departments that have got it and have got access to it. Get your hands on it. Just have a look. You can't break it essentially, but you probably will learn loads of stuff straight away. And then with that learning, you'll find out a couple of things. You'll find out where the holes are, where you might maybe need to talk to a digital team internally to say, look, we need to get better analytics on that platform. We want to know where our medical information inquiries are coming from. And then when you get a bit closer, you get a bit more comfortable with that data, that will enable you to look and say, right, how can we potentially look at automating insight generation, for example? How can we automate how content is served up? How can we automate, the way in which we engage on a web platform, or the way in which we manage medical, categorize medical affairs inquiries, all that kind of stuff. And that leads you to AI, because you get to the point of saying, we've got a lot of data here. It doesn't require human intervention to understand it. And if it does, it takes a long time. But AI can get us 80%, 90% of the way there within a few seconds. and then it can be escalated, have the intuition of a human brain look at it and you know, make decisions before it goes out of the door or anything happens. And that can all be done really simply. It doesn't, from my perspective, need months and months and months, hundreds of people. That's when it becomes overly complicated and you end up sitting in meetings, everyone's talking about theory, and you're kind of, you know, you hear lots of, if we did that, we could do this, and this is the strategy for this element and that element. But the reality of it is, if you get closer to your data, you'll understand it a little bit better, how it connects, how the journey matters to audiences from their perspective, and what you can find out along the way, which will lead you to the ultimate element of how can we automate, smooth the process, make it faster, quicker, better, stronger.
That's really super helpful, Toby, and the way you broke it down is really super super clear. John, based on what Toby just described, how often have you, in your previous roles where you've led various omnichannel initiatives and strategy, how often have you seen that done well, the way Toby described it?
I've seen it done. I think well is quite sort of subjective. I think it's important to leverage what's already available in your organization rather than having to feel like you're having to start from scratch or start from the beginning. So in a previous role where I was setting things up, it was quite daunting thinking I have to do all of this on my own. But actually, a lot of these things, thankfully, in a lot of companies have already been started somewhere. Tech, IT, commercial, data analytics. And I think the key sort of message for me for medical affairs colleagues is we don't need to reinvent the wheel or double up the work. I think the infrastructure is there. What's already being done across the organization, medical should be able to leverage. And we're not on our own. I think we have our subject matter expertise and we've got these tools that are already available. It's just about coming up with the relevant use case for medical and really and trying to adapt what these systems are already doing or what these platforms are doing for use by medical. But there's no reason why you need to start a new system or a new data lake. Of course, there are areas where there will need to be firewalls because of compliance, from a compliance perspective. But for me, it has to be collaboration. When we talk about omnichannel customer experience, it's commercial, medical, other functions working together rather than taking a siloed approach.
So you've been very fortunate to be part of organizations where the infrastructures already existed and medical affairs were able to benefit from it. Maybe let's run a quick poll to get a better sense from our audience around whether these infrastructures do indeed exist in their organizations and whether they have access to, you know, advanced analytics, customer insights analysis, and everything we were just describing. So on the scale of fully functional to not ready at all, where are you and your organization in terms of infrastructural readiness for omnichannel? Okay. So 45% are in progress. About just under 40% are fully functional or somewhat functional. And around 20% are not ready at all. So the situation that, you know, John, you've been fortunate enough to experience doesn't exist in every company. And I think that's something that we need to be mindful of as we talk about omnichannel, because just being able to get the infrastructure that Toby was describing, the ability to be able to centralize the data, understand where we are with the customer journeys, be able to pull insights from those journeys and the resources that we have to inform our customer engagement can be a very daunting step because it's just, you know, it's just infrastructure that doesn't exist. So thinking about those challenges, Toby, with siloed data sources or insufficient customer insights, not being able to really fully map out the customer journeys because we don't have the data, and also the need for us to really move towards more personalized and better more personalized engagements and better segmentation. What can pharma in general do, those of us who don't have this infrastructure? What can we do, and what can medical affairs specifically do to resolve this particular challenge and get a bit more closer to having access to data analytics, centralizing our existing data and being able to pull insights from it?
So yeah, there are some kind of, I guess, some clear challenges. So I'm going to try and give you a bit of a two-part answer, because I think it very much just depends on your organizational size. So, you know, the AstraZenecas, for example, are, you know, giant pharmaceutical companies, very different in their approach to a small biotech, or, you know, somewhere with only a few hundred employees. And I don't think you're not going to expect the smaller biotechs to say, well, you know, we're going to get a data lake, and we're going to fill that data lake with everything we've got and get an outside consultancy, and it's going to cost millions of dollars, and it's not a viable solution. So I think that there's kind of two parts that I think people can do. So if you're on the smaller end of the scale, your organizational size is on the smaller end of the scale, you do have agility on your side somewhat. You know, and I would just pick a small area of your business and get closer to that data, understand it a little bit more. And then if you're on the bigger end of this business, I think that the first thing that you can do is just try and engage with the right teams across the business, is keep running across the chain of the organization to find who is available to kind of support your needs with this. Because, you know, at the end of the day, if you're a medical affairs professional, you probably don't have a career experience in omni-channel delivery, and, you know, nor would anyone expect you to. So it's finding that resources within your business where available, and then you get onto the kind of technology aspect of it, between the whole build versus buy. For example, you know, can you know, build it yourselves? You know, some you know, big life sciences companies are building their own AIs, but there are, you know, you can also buy it in, and I think there's a security element to it, and there's a slight misconception in some places that AI is basically just putting all your data into like ChatGPT, and then it's you know, basically gets published on the internet for everyone to see. Is that when we talk about it in a business capacity, it's not really done like that. Like, you're often engaging with companies that have fully closed networks, so it's not publicly available. They don't use that information for anybody else, and it's, you know, it's the equivalent of what cloud computing was, you know, kind of 20 years ago. Was, you know, everyone was really worried that this data was all going to be in the ether, and now look, we're all using cloud systems, and this is how AI will go. So if you're smaller, you've got a lot more ability to leverage you know, non-enterprise level software that you can use quicker. And if you don't have the capability in-house to do it, you can just pick a small part, learn more about the data, learn just a little bit about, can we connect that information to this information? Is our face-to-face call data, how can we connect some of that kind of face-to-face visit information to some of our web data? And that will get you on your journey. And I think just getting started is the key thing. It doesn't need to be complicated. It doesn't need to be difficult. It's often perceived as being that way, but just taking those first steps, just jumping in will really help.
That's really helpful. And maybe some kind of insights from our experience here at Sorcero. We definitely see some of the smaller kind of biotechs who, exactly to your point, may not always have the internal data analytics or AI infrastructure, work with external vendors like Sorcero to centralize the data, to apply AI to extract customer insights. But actually, a lot of the big farmers are also now utilizing, kind of taking those build or buy decisions, and actually deciding that we're not a technology company, we're a pharmaceutical company, and we want to be able to focus on what we do best and outsource the data analytics and AI components to companies who do this for a living. So there's definitely a split there, but completely agree with that thought process and everything that you just shared. John, anything to add to that?
No, I think Toby covered it really well.
Comprehensive answer. Fantastic. Those are really good examples. Maybe the last question, before we kind of open it up to Q&A. I want to get a little bit more insights from you guys around kind of the budget and the leadership commitment. But before we do that, I want to run one more final poll around who currently funds omnichannel activities in your company. Is it medical affairs? Is it commercial? Is it a shared cross-functional budget that's allocated to omnichannel activities? Or is there a dedicated center of digital excellence that drives and funds omnichannel? Okay. And the results are in. It's okay, so about 47% is either a shared cross-functional budget or digital center of excellence, which I assume would be a cross-functional center as well. And 30% is within medical affairs and 23% is funded by commercial. So interesting split there. Sometimes it's very functional, sometimes it sits above functions and it's being driven at a cross-functional level. Given that budget and leadership commitment are still remaining to be issues that affects the success of transformational initiatives like this one, and as obvious as the value proposition that omnichannel brings may be, resources are still very limited. And we do need infrastructure, but we also need proof of concept. We need to be able to use data to drive decision making and success, but we don't have a data lake. What do we do? How do we go about resolving this and getting that buying that we need, getting the budget that's required to drive a successful omnichannel strategy? John.
So I covered it before with the 4 Ps that I mentioned, and leadership buy-in is important. This is not something that's going to happen. Omnichannel taking off is not going to happen by some sort of divine intervention. People need to understand that you need investment, and that this is going to take time to evolve and to mature. What I found useful is, as I mentioned before, starting with a proof of concept or a small experiment with what you already have and showing some quick wins, being agile and showing these results, and then building on that. As I said, buy-in and change management is going to be really, really important. So I think things need to happen in parallel. But for me, if you want to get that buy-in quickly and you want to get that investment, do a small experiment, select a topic or a question where you see there is a need there, and where omnichannel or whatever digital intervention or tool you want to use to show the value that this can bring to the organization, but also to healthcare professionals. And really, we really need to start getting feedback from those external stakeholders to really see, is this resonating with them? Is this how they want to be engaged with? Is this working for them? And the best thing you can do is then go back to your leadership and say, this HCP NPS score 5 out of 5, or they would recommend our content because we've done X, Y, and Z. And that for me is a big win.
Being able to really kind of clearly measure the impact using a small experiment that shows value, and then scaling up from there. No, I love that. Thank you. Toby, based on your experience, anything else to add in terms of achieving that leadership buying and the budget requirements, securing the budget requirements to get this done?
I think it's, as John said, I think it has to be incremental. You can't embark on it all the way. It will take too long to show that on a big scale. I think small wins that demonstrate that proof of concept, even if it is a small thing like you said earlier on, getting closer to your web traffic data to find something out that you never knew before that you can base a decision off. If you can take that to upper management and say, look, if we expand this out across all the therapy areas that we work on, all the teams, all the markets, it's invaluable, and it will just add a much greater level of insight into the business from the start. If you can just take those small steps.
It doesn't always have to be. I guess those experiments don't always have to be expensive, right? Like there's definitely small scale, but very impactful and high learning experiments that we can run that I'm sure both of you have done in your past, and I have also done in my past life. So definitely agree with that approach. Okay, we're going to open it up to a few questions in the last 9 minutes of this webinar. And I was going to ask for more kind of tangible examples of AI being used across the industry. Toby, you already shared examples of how AstraZeneca has done it, and we've already heard from both of you examples throughout the webinar. So I'm not going to spend any more time on more tangible examples. But before we kind of open it up to Q&A, I want to kind of also touch on the fact that here at Sorcero, the Sorcero offerings also do have the ability to centralize structured and unstructured HCP data that medical affairs holds. Like, as we said, we have so much data within medical affairs in siloed sources, and we have done a lot of kind of these small scale or large scale projects and experiments with pharmaceutical companies, specifically medical affairs, to show them how advanced analytics can actually help them inform their segmentation strategy, their customer journey mapping, being able to utilize customer insights to actually shape personalization and drive better omnichannel analytics to simplify the KPI and ROI models that medical affairs needs to be able to scale things up. And I know we didn't touch on kind of any of those features and functionalities in this webinar because this is intentionally designed to be a thought leadership best practice sharing webinar. But anyone who wants to see more examples of how Sorcero does it, there will be a follow-up email immediately after this webinar with a registration link to sign up if you do want to see those features and functionalities and examples of how Sorcero AI supports Omnichannel. Okay, with that, let's open it up to the floor and answer some of the questions. Okay, I'm gonna read some of the questions and ask you guys to answer it. Not getting into the commercial measurements of success, how do you suggest medical affairs shows KPIs for omnichannel activities in a compliant manner? John, maybe I open this one to you first.
Sure. Again, putting my sort of med ed
Yes.
hat on, I would like to understand when I put my content out there, for example, is this what impact is it having on the healthcare professional? Is it changing their level, knowledge level? Is this content that will support their clinical practice in any way? Would they recommend it to a colleague? Is there any impact on patient outcomes potentially? Of course, there are things that you can measure straight away, and there are things that you would need sort of measure longitudinally. But I think we need to move away from those vanity metrics, which is how many times has my content been viewed or how many times has it been shared, etc. But actually start delving into the depth of the engagement and really understand, is it making a difference with the healthcare professional? Is it moving the needle in any way? Obviously, being very aware that we shouldn't be linking any of our medical activities to sales, etc. So for me, that's another way of really showing the impact of what I would do from a sort of medical education perspective, for example.
And maybe a follow-up question on that, John, to you. Have you seen the use of kind of change in scientific sentiment, which, as you know, AI allows us to do very easily now, be kind of used as a measure of impact of omnichannel customer engagement? And what are your thoughts about that particular measure?
I think for me, I think it's a useful measure. What I would say is it's difficult to pinpoint. If you're looking at KPIs for specific activities, it's then difficult to say which activity have you done that resulted in that specific change in sentiment. But globally, I think in terms of have activities in general led to a change in sentiment, I think that is useful. The other thing is there are so many channels, both pharma and non-pharma. You can never also say, is this because of what I'm doing? Is it because of what a third party is doing? Which is why I think it's important to use things in tandem. So looking at some of these KPIs that I mentioned regarding your content, and then maybe trying to look at some parallels to see, okay, this is what my HCPs are saying about my activities or my content, and this is the sentiment that I'm seeing. Are there any associations that we can draw, any relationships?
Yeah, I agree. It's very multifactorial. Completely agree. Toby, anything to add regarding measuring success of omnichannel?
I think just it's about working out what you value the most from your engagement with the content. So what I mean by that is John mentioned it earlier on. So forgetting the measures that just talk about effectively like bums on seats, how many people have seen this or how many people have looked at it, clicked. It's all kind of performance metrics. So you need to go beyond that and say, right, actually, it's how have people engaged with this? Is it in the way in which I would like them to? We would like them to, the best way to get the most out of it. Or is it in a different way, or is it not performing? And if it's not performing, is that because the content could be structured in a different way? Could it be the messaging be a clearer for it? You know, do we need to change the format in which it's delivered, and so on and so forth? And that level of data will really help to improve. And you can get that just through building a set of objectives with the right metrics.
No, that's fantastic and really helpful. Thank you both for sharing your insights on that really important topic. Okay, next question. How well do you think data sources such as lab data, claims data, prescriptions can inform HCP targeting and messaging? Toby, maybe I'll open this up to you first.
It's a good question. It depends on a couple of factors to start off with. The biggest ones being which market are you in and which regulations are you working against.
I suspect this is coming from the US market, just based on the fact that
so
availability of data alone.
It won't work everywhere, and it will only work in certain channels because you don't necessarily have that level of data. So unless you've got someone effectively to log into something, you don't always know who they are, and to be able to target them is hard. Like as in at a granular level, it's much easier to target segmented groups, or if you're in the US, it's a bit easier again to kind of target those segmented groups. I think that data is very valuable, and it should be used if you can in that setting. But I don't think that it will give you kind of the silver bullet of being able to get to everybody you want with exactly the right message you want. That's where like omnichannel kind of comes into its own a bit more, because you look at different demographics, behaviors, channel usage, that kind of thing, which will, on top of all of that, help you target more.
No, thank you. Some of what examples of where I've seen this type of data be incorporated, like I said before, one of Sorcero's core offerings is the ability to centralize data. So we have seen clients who, they have access to lab data and claims data and prescription data, publication data, internal CRM data, ad boards, etc. And some of our clients have been super transformative and really have combined all of these data sources to get that true 360 view of their HCPs and KOLs, to be able to see exactly who are they, what kind of information do they consume from me as an MSL, what publication work or trials or research work are they currently working on, and also what are the clinical practice behaviors that we're seeing down the line using lab data or prescription data as a proxy to their clinical behaviors. So we've definitely seen some really good best practice examples of how all these data sources have been combined to really inform some of the personalization aspects of omnichannel. But I agree with you, it very much depends on the market. Conscious that we have 1 minute left. Thank you again both so much for participating and for sharing your insights and your experience. I personally very much enjoyed having you on and hearing your thoughts and your experience in this area, and I'm sure our audience did too. As I mentioned, there will be a follow-up email with a webinar link for the very specific functionalities demo that will be next week. And if anyone has any questions from myself, Toby, or John, please feel free to reach out to my email, and we'll be very happy to respond to you offline. Thank you guys again, and thank you to our audience for participating and following us in this webinar. Bye-bye.